The fork never touched his lips. Dominic Santoro, the most feared mafia boss in Chicago, had just lifted a piece of braised beef toward his mouth, the familiar aroma filling the elegant private dining room. Tonight was a celebration. $5 million worth of weapons would arrive at the docks tomorrow. Everything was perfect. Then, the door burst open. A little girl stumbled in so thin her shoulder blades jutted through her torn shirt, barefoot, black hair tangled and soaked with rain. She couldn't have been older than 6. "Don't eat it." Her voice cracked against the howling storm outside. "Please don't eat it." 10 guns rose and aimed straight at the child, but Dominic raised his hand, signaling them to stop. His cold gray eyes locked onto the trembling girl before him. "Why?" His voice was low and dangerous. "Why shouldn't I eat?" The girl swallowed. Her large brown eyes stared directly at the mafia boss without looking away. "Because I saw the man who put poison in it." The entire room froze. The fork in Dominic's hand hung suspended in midair. His underbosses exchanged glances. No one dared to breathe. "Little one." Dominic set down the fork, his voice slow and deliberate. "Describe this man to me." The girl closed her eyes, as if trying to recall every detail. Tall, brown hair turning gray on the sides, wearing a brown leather jacket. She opened her eyes and pointed to the back of her right hand. "And he has a scar right here, shaped like a sickle." The blood in Dominic's veins turned to ice. He knew that scar. He had created it himself 20 years ago, when he was a 17-year-old apprentice under his father. The man who bore that scar was Marcus Webb, his father's former underboss, a man who had been buried in the ground 12 years ago. A dead man. A dead man was trying to kill him, but the girl wasn't finished. "There's one more thing." Her voice dropped so low that Dominic had to lean forward to hear. "That man, he tried to kill me last night too." Dominic looked at the 6-year-old standing before him, soaking wet, shivering, barefoot on the cold marble floor. She had nothing but her tattered clothes and eyes far too old for her age. Yet she had risked her life to run here and save him, a complete stranger. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softening slightly. "Lily," the girl answered. "Lily Chen." Dominic rose to his feet, his shadow falling over the small child. 12 years ago, he thought everything was over. 12 years ago, he thought his enemy was dead. He was wrong. And the only person who could help him uncover the truth was standing right in front of him, a 6-year-old homeless girl with bare feet and a burn scar on her arm. Tonight, everything would change, and this story was only just beginning. The room remained frozen in stunned silence. Every man present had faced death before bullets, blades, betrayals, but none of them had ever confronted a ghost. Dominic's mind raced beneath his calm exterior. Marcus Webb. The name echoed through his skull like a funeral bell. He needed more information, and the only source stood before him, shivering in her rags. "Lily." His voice was controlled, measured. "Tell me everything else you remember about this man. Every detail, no matter how small." The girl hugged herself tightly, water still dripping from her hair onto the marble floor. She closed her eyes again, concentrating with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child her age. "He wears a gold watch," she said slowly, "big and shiny. He keeps looking at it, like he's waiting for something." She paused, then added, "And he drives a black car, really long, with dark windows. The license plate has the letters M and W at the beginning. Marcus Webb, his initials." Even after 12 years of supposed death, the man couldn't resist marking his territory. Dominic remembered that arrogance well. It was what had made Marcus both valuable and dangerous. A memory surfaced unbidden. 12 years ago, standing beside an open grave, rain pouring down, much like tonight. The priest's voice droning on about ashes and dust. Dominic had been 25 then, newly in charge after his father's assassination. He had watched Marcus Webb's casket descend into the earth with his own eyes, or so he had believed. "There's more," Lily continued, pulling Dominic back to the present. "Last night, when he thought I was sleeping under the bridge, he was on the phone. He kept talking about a ship and something called Warehouse 7. He said everything had to happen before the ship arrived." The words hit Dominic like a sledgehammer to the chest. Warehouse 7. That was where tomorrow's weapons shipment would be stored. $5 million worth of firearms, ammunition, and explosives enough to supply his operations for the next 2 years. Only his most trusted people knew about that location, which meant Marcus had someone on the inside. Vincent Torres, his underboss and closest friend since childhood, stepped forward. His scarred face was tight with concern. "Boss, we need to check the docks immediately. If Webb knows about the shipment, he knows." Dominic's voice was flat. "The question is how much he knows, and who told him." His gaze swept across the room, studying each face. These were men he had trusted with his life. Men who had bled for him, killed for him. But one of them, perhaps more than one, had betrayed him to a dead man. In the corner, Leo Marchetti shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The old consigliere was 62, had served the Santoro family for over 3 decades. He had been like an uncle to Dominic after his father's death, teaching him the business, guiding his decisions. But now, Leo's wrinkled hands were fidgeting with his napkin in a way Dominic had never seen before. His eyes kept darting toward the door, as if calculating an escape route. Dominic filed the observation away. Trust no one. Not until he knew the full scope of the conspiracy. "Vincent," he commanded, "get our people at the port on the phone. I want a status report on every guard, every warehouse, every vehicle that has entered or left the area in the past 48 hours. Vincent pulled out his phone and stepped aside, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. Lily watched the exchange with wide eyes, taking in every detail despite her exhaustion. This child had survived on the streets by being observant, by reading situations and people. Dominic recognized the skill because he had developed it himself at a young age. 2 minutes later, Vincent returned. His face had gone pale beneath his olive complexion. "Boss." His voice was strained. "We have a problem. 3 of our guards at the port went dark 2 hours ago. Their families say they never came home from their shifts." He swallowed hard. "And there's been unusual activity around Warehouse 7. Vehicles moving in and out that aren't on any of our schedules." Dominic's jaw tightened. Marcus wasn't just planning an assassination. He was orchestrating a complete takeover, and he was already 2 steps ahead. Dominic turned back to look at Lily. The girl was trembling violently now, her lips turning a dangerous shade of purple. The adrenaline that had carried her through the storm was fading, leaving behind a fragile child on the verge of collapse. "Marco," Dominic called to one of his men, "bring warm food from the kitchen. Something simple, soup, bread, and find dry clothes. There must be something that will fit her." Marco hesitated for just a moment. Taking orders to care for a street child was not part of his usual duties, but one look at Dominic's face sent him hurrying toward the back. While they waited, Dominic pulled a chair closer to where Lily stood. He sat down, bringing himself to her eye level. It was a gesture he rarely made. Men twice his size had begged for such consideration and never received it. "Lily," his voice was softer than before, though still carrying the weight of authority. "How long have you been living on the streets?" The girl's eyes flickered with something surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. She was not accustomed to adults asking about her well-being. In her experience, their questions usually came with ulterior motives. She remained silent for a long moment. The only sounds were the rain hammering against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. Then, slowly, she began to speak. 5 months. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I ran away 5 months ago." "From where?" Lily's small hands clenched into fists at her sides. "From my foster family, the 4th one." Dominic waited. He had learned long ago that silence often extracted more truth than interrogation. "My mama died when I was 4, Lily continued, her eyes fixed on the floor. "She took too much medicine, the bad kind. I found her on the bathroom floor." A pause. "I stayed with her for 3 days. I thought she was just sleeping. I kept telling her to wake up." Something cold twisted in Dominic's chest. He kept his expression neutral, but his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "My daddy left before I was born. I never knew him." Lily shrugged, as if abandonment was simply a fact of life. "After Mama died, they put me in foster care. 4 different houses in 2 years. Why did you leave?" The girl's body tensed. Her right hand moved instinctively to cover her left forearm, the arm with the burn scar Dominic had noticed earlier. "They weren't nice," she said simply. "None of them were nice." She did not elaborate. She did not need to. The scar told its own story. So did the way she flinched whenever someone moved too quickly near her, the way her eyes constantly scanned for exits, the way she held herself like a wounded animal ready to flee. Dominic thought of his own mother, beautiful, kind, always smelling of lavender. He had been 8 years old when rival gangsters broke into their home. He had hidden in the closet, watching through the slats as they shot her 3 times in the chest. The image still haunted his nightmares. Nearly 3 decades later, this child had suffered just as much, perhaps more, and she had done it alone. Marco returned with a tray of hot soup and a thick wool blanket. Lily's eyes widened at the sight of food, real food, not garbage scraps, but she did not reach for it immediately. She looked at Dominic first, as if asking permission, as if expecting the offer to be snatched away. "Eat," he said gently. "It's safe." She wrapped the blanket around her thin shoulders and began to eat, slowly at first, then with increasing desperation. Dominic watched in silence, his mind churning with questions. When she finally paused for breath, Lily looked up at him with those ancient eyes. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The man with the scar, when he tried to give me the poisoned food last night, he knew my name." Her voice trembled. "He called me his little prey." And then he laughed. Dominic shot to his feet, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. His mind was racing, connecting dots that formed a terrifying picture. Marcus knew Lily's name. He had tracked her, watched her, chosen her specifically as a test subject for his poison. This was not a coincidence. This was surveillance, careful, patient, methodical surveillance that had been going on for God knows how long, which meant Marcus had eyes everywhere, including, possibly, inside this very room. "Vincent," Dominic's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Triple the security on all our properties. I want armed men at every entrance, every exit, every window. Nobody moves without being watched." Vincent nodded and began making calls. "Elena." Dominic turned to the slim woman seated at the far end of the table. Elena Vance, 34, had been his chief accountant for 5 years. She handled money that never appeared on any official ledger. "I need a complete audit of every financial transaction in the past 6 months. Every dollar that moved in or out of our accounts. Look for anything unusual, payments that don't match, transfers to unknown recipients, anything." Elena's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her pen. "I'll start immediately, Mr. Santoro." Dominic filed away her micro-reaction. "Trust no one," the mantra repeated in his head like a drumbeat. He turned back to Lily, who had stopped eating and was watching the chaos unfold with alert eyes. "The man on the phone, Marcus, did he mention any other names? Anyone he was talking to?" Lily's brow furrowed in concentration. The blanket slipped from one shoulder as she thought. "He said a name a lot. Johnny. He kept saying Johnny would take care of things at the water, the docks. Johnny Rizzo. They called him Johnny the Butcher, not because of any particular violence, but because his father had owned a meatpacking plant before the family moved into more lucrative enterprises. Johnny had been managing the port operations for 8 years. He knew every shipment, every schedule, every guard rotation. If Johnny was the leak, then Marcus had access to everything. Dominic's gaze swept across the faces of his underbosses. Leo Marchetti, still fidgeting nervously with his napkin. Vincent Torres, barking orders into his phone with apparent loyalty. Marco, standing guard by the door. Danny Kowalski, the young bodyguard who had joined their ranks 3 years ago. Any one of them could be a traitor. Or all of them, or none of them. And the real snake was someone he had not yet considered. 20 years in this business had taught Dominic many things. The most important lesson was this betrayal never came from enemies. It came from friends, from family, from the people you trusted enough to let close. His father had been killed by his own bodyguard. His mother had been murdered because someone inside their organization had sold their address. History, it seemed, was determined to repeat itself. Elena returned sooner than expected, her heels clicking rapidly against the floor. Her face was pale. "Mr. Santoro." Her voice was tight. "I found something. There have been irregular transfers over the past 3 months. Small amounts, designed to avoid detection. They're being funneled to an offshore account in the Caymans." She hesitated. The authorization codes belonged to someone in the inner circle. Before Dominic could respond, the door burst open. Danny Kowalski rushed in, his young face flushed with urgency. "Boss." He was breathing hard, as if he had sprinted the entire way. "We found Johnny Rizzo's car. It's parked at the abandoned industrial complex on the south side." Danny swallowed. "That's the property Marcus Webb owned before he died." Vincent stepped closer to Dominic, lowering his voice so only his boss could hear. His scarred face was grim with pragmatic concern. "Boss, we need to move fast, but the girl..." He glanced at Lily, who was clutching the blanket around her thin shoulders. "She knows too much. She's seen our faces, heard our conversations. In our line of work, loose ends like this get people killed." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Maybe we should handle this quietly." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dominic turned slowly to face his underboss. His gray eyes had gone from cold to glacial, a look that had preceded more than one execution in this very building. "Handle it?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "You're suggesting we kill a 6-year-old girl who just saved my life?" Vincent held his ground, though his jaw tightened. "I'm suggesting we do what's necessary. We've done worse for less, Dominic. You know that." For a long moment, Dominic said nothing. His gaze drifted past Vincent, past the room full of armed men, past the rain-lashed windows to somewhere far away and long ago. He was 8 years old again, hiding in his mother's closet. The gunshots had stopped. The killers had left. He had crawled out to find her lying on the bedroom floor, blood pooling beneath her body like a dark halo. She was still breathing barely. Her eyes found his, and with her last breath, she had whispered words he would never forget. "Don't become a monster like your father, my love. Promise me." He had promised, and for 29 years, he had struggled to keep that promise while building an empire on blood and fear. He had killed men who deserved it and some who probably did not. He had done terrible things in the name of power and survival. But he had never harmed a child. He had never crossed that line. He would not start tonight. Lily stays under my protection. Dominic's voice rang through the room like a judge's gavel. Anyone who touches her, anyone who even thinks about touching her, answers to me personally. Is that clear? The room went silent. Vincent's eyes widened slightly. In 20 years of friendship, he had never heard Dominic speak with such ferocity about protecting an outsider, especially not a homeless child who meant nothing to their organization. Crystal clear. Boss, Vincent murmured, stepping back. Dominic turned to Marco. Bring more food, and find proper clothes for her shoes. A warm jacket, everything. She's staying with us tonight. Marco nodded and disappeared through the service door. Lily watched this exchange with wide, uncertain eyes. She had understood enough to know that the scarred man had wanted to hurt her, and that the boss, this terrifying, powerful man, had refused, more than refused. He had threatened to kill anyone who tried. No adult had ever protected her before. Not her mother, who had chosen drugs over her daughter. Not her father, who had vanished before she was born. Not the foster families who had beaten her, starved her, burned her. When Marco returned with fresh clothes, a sweater 3 sizes too big, sweatpants that had to be rolled at the ankles, and sneakers that were almost the right size, Lily changed in the corner, her back to the room. For the first time in 5 months, she felt warm, clean, almost safe. She looked at Dominic with different eyes now, still wary, still cautious, but the raw terror had faded into something else, something that might, in time, become trust. Dominic checked his weapon and holstered it beneath his jacket. His men were already preparing to move. "Lily comes with us to the industrial complex," he announced. "She's the only person who has seen Marcus recently. She's the only one who can identify him on sight." The convoy of black SUVs tore through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, heading south toward the industrial wasteland that bordered the river. Streetlights grew sparse, then disappeared entirely. The city's glittering skyline faded in the rearview mirrors, replaced by the skeletal silhouettes of abandoned factories. This part of Chicago had died decades ago, when the steel mills closed and the jobs vanished. Now it was a graveyard of rusted machinery and shattered dreams, the perfect hiding place for a ghost. Lily sat in the back of the second vehicle, wedged between Danny Kowalski and a stack of tactical equipment. The young bodyguard kept glancing at her nervously, as if unsure how to behave around a child in the middle of a manhunt. But Lily was not paying attention to him. Her eyes were fixed on the window, watching the decaying landscape roll past. She had learned to observe everything, to notice details that others missed. It was how she had survived on the streets. It was how she had spotted Marcus putting poison in the food. The convoy slowed as they approached the industrial complex. Through the rain-streaked glass, Lily could see the hulking shape of the old factory, a massive structure of corroded steel and broken windows. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete. Graffiti covered the walls like infected wounds. The lead vehicle stopped. Dominic stepped out, his polished shoes splashing in a puddle. His men followed, weapons drawn, moving with practiced precision. The wind howled through the empty buildings, carrying with it the groan of rusted metal and the skittering of debris across pavement. Somewhere in the darkness, a loose chain clanked rhythmically against a pole, like the tolling of a funeral bell. There, Vincent pointed toward a dark sedan parked near the factory's loading dock. "That's Johnny's car." They approached cautiously, guns trained on every shadow. The sedan's driver door hung open, interior light long dead. As they got closer, Dominic saw what he had feared: dark stains on the leather seat, still glistening wet. Blood, a lot of it. "Search the car," Dominic ordered. Marco reached inside, careful not to disturb potential evidence. He emerged holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Boss, you need to see this." Dominic took the paper and unfolded it. His jaw tightened. It was a list of names, his men, his allies, his business partners. Most had been crossed out with thick black X marks. Some names he recognized as people who had died over the past year. deaths he had attributed to accidents or rival disputes. At the bottom of the list, circled in red ink, was his own name, Dominic Santoro, the only one without an X. Not yet. He's been hunting us, Vincent muttered, reading over Dominic's shoulder, picking us off one by one. And we never even knew. A small hand tugged at Dominic's sleeve. Lily had somehow slipped out of the car and approached without anyone noticing, a skill born from months of avoiding detection on the streets. "I smell him," she whispered, her nose wrinkling. The same smell from under the bridge. Sweet, like flowers, but wrong, like something dead. Dominic inhaled deeply. Beneath the scent of rain and rust, there was something else, a cloying cologne that tickled the edge of memory. Marcus had always worn that fragrance. Even at his own funeral, the casket had reeked of it. "He's here," Lily breathed, her small body pressing closer to Dominic's leg. "He's close." A single gunshot cracked through the night, echoing from somewhere deep within the factory. Then silence, heavy, suffocating, absolute. Dominic grabbed Lily by the shoulders, his grip firm but not unkind. He looked directly into her eyes. "Stay in the car with Danny. Lock the doors. Do not open them for anyone except me or Vincent. Understood?" Lily nodded, her face pale but determined. Danny guided her back to the SUV, one hand on his holstered weapon, eyes scanning the darkness. Dominic turned to his men. "Vincent, Marco, with me. Everyone else, secure the perimeter. Shoot anything that moves and isn't us." They entered the factory through a rusted service door, its hinges screaming in protest. Inside, the darkness was almost absolute. The only light came from distant street lamps filtering through shattered windows, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent life. Dominic moved first, his pistol raised, footsteps silent on the concrete floor. Behind him, Vincent and Marco fanned out, covering angles with practiced efficiency. The smell of decay and machine oil filled their nostrils, undercut by that sickly sweet cologne that seemed to permeate everything. They followed the scent of blood. The factory floor opened into a vast space filled with abandoned machinery, conveyor belts frozen mid-motion, presses rusted shut, chains hanging from the ceiling like the entrails of some mechanical beast. At the center of this industrial graveyard, illuminated by a single flickering work light, was a chair. Johnny Rizzo sat in that chair. Or what was left of him. His wrists were bound to the armrests with wire that had cut deep into flesh. His face was a swollen mass of purple and black bruises. One eye completely shut, the other staring blankly ahead. His shirt was soaked with blood, and where his left hand should have had 5 fingers, there were now only 2. "Jesus Christ," Vincent breathed. Dominic rushed forward, pressing his fingers to Johnny's neck, a pulse weak, thready, but present. "Johnny." Dominic leaned close. "Johnny, who did this? Where is Marcus?" Johnny's remaining eye flickered with recognition. His cracked lips moved, producing sounds barely louder than breath. "He knows. Everything." Johnny's voice was a wet rasp. "Someone. Inside. Trust." His eye rolled toward Dominic with desperate intensity. "Leo. Don't trust. Leo." Then his head slumped forward, unconscious. A flicker of movement on the catwalk above. Dominic looked up just in time to see a figure retreating into the shadows, tall, wearing a brown leather jacket, moving with a slight limp that triggered a flood of memories. That limp was from a bullet wound Dominic's father had given Marcus during a dispute over territory, 30 years ago. "There!" Dominic shouted, already running. He took the stairs 3 at a time, Vincent close behind. The catwalk groaned under their weight. Ahead, Marcus's silhouette disappeared through a doorway. They burst through into a narrow corridor lined with offices. Empty. Dominic kicked open door after door, finding nothing but dust and cobwebs. At the end of the hall, an emergency exit stood open, cold rain blowing in. Marcus was gone, but he had left a message. On the wall beside the exit, written in blood that was still dripping, were words that made Dominic's stomach turn. 12 years. Now it's your turn to suffer. Dominic stared at the message, his chest heaving. 12 years of planning, 12 years of patience. Marcus had been watching, waiting, assembling his revenge piece by piece while Dominic lived his life believing the threat was buried. "Boss," Marco's voice crackled over the radio. "You need to get back here. Now." Something in that tone turned Dominic's blood to ice. He ran. Back through the corridor, down the stairs, across the factory floor, past Johnny's slumped body, out into the rain, his shoes pounding against the wet concrete. The SUV's doors were hanging open. The interior light illuminated a scene of chaos, equipment scattered, a smear of blood on the doorframe. Danny lay crumpled on the ground beside the vehicle, a gash on his temple still bleeding. He was groaning, trying to rise. "The girl," Danny gasped. "Someone came from behind. I couldn't." Dominic looked into the empty back seat, his heart hammering against his ribs. Lily was gone. Dominic dropped to his knees beside Danny, grabbing the young man's collar and slapping his face hard. "Wake up, Danny, wake up." Danny's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with panic. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his skull. "Someone came from behind," he gasped, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I didn't see them. I didn't hear them. One second the girl was in the car. The next, his voice cracked. "I'm sorry, boss. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stop them." Dominic released Danny's collar and stood, his chest heaving. Around him, his men were already spreading out, searching the perimeter with flashlights cutting through the rain. But Dominic knew it was too late. Marcus had planned this perfectly. The gunshot inside the factory, it had been a distraction, designed to lure them away from the vehicles. Away from Lily, a feeling he had not experienced in nearly 30 years clawed its way up from the depths of his chest. Fear. Real, primal, suffocating fear. The last time he had felt this way, he had been 8 years old, crawling out of a closet toward his mother's body. The helplessness, the certainty that something precious had been taken and would never be returned. "Search everywhere." Dominic's voice came out raw, almost unrecognizable. "Every building, every shadow, every boss." Vincent approached, holding something in his gloved hand. "We found these, small footprints in the mud, leading toward the river, and caught on a chain-link fence, a torn piece of fabric gray wool from the sweater they had given Lily less than an hour ago." Dominic took the fabric, his fingers trembling slightly. Such a small piece of cloth, such a small girl. His phone rang. The caller ID showed nothing, blocked number, untraceable. Dominic answered anyway, pressing the device to his ear. "Hello, Dominic." The voice was calm, cultured, carrying the faint echo of an accent that had softened over decades in America. "It's been a long time, Marcus Webb. Speaking from the grave. Where is she?" Dominic's voice was ice and steel. "The girl? She's here with me. Quite a brave little thing, actually. Reminds me of your sister when she was young." A pause, deliberate and cruel. "Sophia, wasn't it? I always thought she was the beauty of your family." Dominic's grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. "If you touch one hair on that child's head, I will find you, and I will make what you did to Johnny look like a mercy." Marcus laughed, a sound without warmth or humanity. "Such passion, Dominic. Such fire. Your father would be proud." The laughter stopped abruptly. "But we both know you're not in a position to make threats. I have something you want, and you have something I've been waiting 12 years to take. What do you want? Simple terms. You come to me. Alone. No weapons. No backup. Just you and your guilt." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do this, and the girl lives. Refuse, and I'll send her back to you in pieces." Starting with those clever little eyes that saw too much, Dominic closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe. "Where? I'll send coordinates within the hour. Come alone, Dominic. I'll know if you don't." The line began to click, signaling an imminent disconnect. But Marcus had one more thing to say. "Oh, and Dominic, when you get back to your restaurant, ask Leo Marchetti if he received his payments on time. The old man has expensive taste for someone on a fixed salary." The call ended. The convoy raced back through the storm-drenched streets. Dominic sat in silence, his knuckles white against his thighs, his mind replaying Marcus's words over and over. Ask Leo Marchetti if he received his payments on time. The restaurant was exactly as they had left it, guards at every entrance, lights blazing against the darkness. But nothing felt safe anymore. The walls that had protected Dominic for years now felt like the bars of a cage. Leo Marchetti was still seated at the corner table, nursing a glass of whiskey. His wrinkled face showed relief when Dominic walked through the door, relief that quickly turned to confusion. Then fear, as he registered the look in his boss's eyes. Dominic crossed the room in 6 strides. Without breaking pace, he grabbed Leo by the collar and hauled the older man to his feet, sending the whiskey glass shattering against the floor. 3 decades. Dominic's voice was barely controlled. 30 years you've served this family. You held me when I cried at my father's funeral. You taught me how to run this organization. You called yourself my uncle. Leo's face had gone pale. Dominic, what Johnny Rizzo is in the hospital with 2 fingers missing and half his blood on the factory floor. Before he passed out, he said your name. Dominic's grip tightened. And Marcus Webb, a dead man, just told me to ask you about your payments. The color drained completely from Leo's face. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't come. I don't know what you're don't. Dominic's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare lie to me. Not now. Not after everything. Leo's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. When he spoke again, his voice was that of a broken man. He contacted me 3 years ago. The words came slowly, painfully. Marcus. I thought it was a joke at first. Everyone knew he was dead. But he had proof. Documents, photographs, things only he could know. Vincent moved closer, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Dominic raised a finger, signaling him to wait. He offered me a position, Leo continued, unable to meet Dominic's eyes. A real position, power, respect. Everything I had before your father died. His voice turned bitter. Everything you took from me when you started treating me like a relic. The words hit Dominic like a physical blow. I trusted you, and I served you faithfully for 12 years. Leo's voice rose with sudden anger. I gave you everything, my loyalty, my knowledge, my best years. And what did I get? Pushed aside, ignored, treated like an old dog waiting to be put down. So you sold me to a ghost. Leo's anger deflated as quickly as it had flared. I didn't know what he was planning. Not all of it. He said he just wanted information, schedules, shipments, security details. I thought. He trailed off, the excuse dying on his lips. Vincent drew his gun, pressing the barrel against Leo's temple. One word, boss. Just one word and this traitor stops breathing. Dominic stared at the man who had been like family to him. The man who had betrayed him. The man who might still have information that could save Lily's life. Not yet. The words tasted like ash. He's going to tell us everything first. Leo fell to his knees, hands clasped in supplication. I'll tell you everything. Every detail. Every contact. Every safe house. But Dominic, you need to understand Marcus doesn't just want you dead. He wants everything. Your money, your territory, your power. Leo's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. And he wants Sophia. He's been obsessed with your sister since before you were born. 20 years he's waited for her. Dominic froze. The name hit him like a bullet to the chest. Sophia, his little sister, the only family he had left, the one person he had tried desperately to keep away from this world of blood and betrayal. For 5 years, she had refused to speak to him. 5 years of unanswered calls, returned letters, silence that cut deeper than any knife. The last time he had seen her face, it had been twisted with rage and grief, tears streaming down her cheeks as she screamed words that still echoed in his nightmares. You killed our childhood, Dominic. You chose this life over us, over Mom's memory, over everything she wanted for you. Sophia's voice had cracked with pain. I will never forgive you. Never. She had walked out of his penthouse that night and never looked back. Now she lived in the suburbs, as far from Chicago's criminal underworld as she could get without leaving the state. She taught 3rd grade at a public elementary school, drove a modest sedan, lived in a small house with a garden she tended herself. She had changed her last name, erased every trace of the Santoro legacy from her life. She had built something clean, something good, something their mother would have been proud of, and Marcus Webb wanted to destroy it. Send men to Sophia's house, Dominic commanded, his voice tight. Now, I want a full security detail around her within the hour. Vincent was already on his phone, barking orders. Dominic turned back to Leo, who was still kneeling on the floor. Tell me about Marcus and my sister. Everything. Leo swallowed hard. It started 20 years ago, before your father faked Marcus's death. Marcus was obsessed with Sophia. She was only 12 then, but he talked about her constantly, said she was different from the rest of your family. Pure, innocent. Leo's voice dropped with disgust. He asked your father for permission to court her when she came of age. Dominic felt bile rise in his throat. And my father? Refused. Violently. That's when things started to go wrong between them. Marcus felt humiliated, rejected. He believed your father was keeping Sophia from him out of spite. Leo shook his head. After Marcus was killed, I thought the obsession died with him. But when he contacted me 3 years ago, the first thing he asked about was Sophia, where she lived, whether she was married, whether she was happy. The picture became horrifyingly clear. This was not just about power or revenge against the Santoro organization. This was personal, intimate. Marcus had spent 20 years nurturing a twisted fantasy, and now he was ready to claim what he believed was rightfully his. Dominic's phone buzzed. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. Boss. Vincent's voice was strained. We got to Sophia's house. She's not here. Neighbors say she left for a school conference yesterday. Won't be back until tomorrow. Relief flooded through Dominic's chest, followed immediately by fresh dread. But there's something else, Vincent continued. The house was broken into, drawers ransacked, photos taken off the walls, and they left something on the kitchen table. I'm sending it to you now. The phone buzzed again with an incoming image. Dominic opened it. His heart stopped. Lily stared back at him from the photograph. Her small body was bound to a metal chair with thick rope. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple bruises blooming across her cheek. Silver tape covered her mouth. But her right eye, that one brown eye that had seen too much, stared directly at the camera with an expression that was neither fear nor defeat. It was defiance. Scrawled across the bottom of the photo in red marker were 5 words. Your move, Dominic. Clocks ticking. Dominic stared at the photograph, his hands trembling. But it was not fear that made them shake, it was rage. Pure, white-hot rage that burned through his veins like molten steel. A 6-year-old girl, beaten, bound, used as a pawn in a dead man's game of revenge. Lily had survived horrors that would have broken most adults. She had lost her mother, endured years of abuse, lived on the streets with nothing but her wits to protect her. And when she had finally found someone willing to help her, she had been snatched away and brutalized. Because of him. Because she had tried to save him. Dominic carefully placed the phone face down on the table. When he spoke, his voice was terrifyingly calm. Everyone out except Vincent, Danny, and Marco. The room emptied quickly. Leo Marchetti was dragged away by 2 guards, his fate still undecided. Within moments, only 4 men remained in the private dining room. We have until dawn, Dominic said. Marcus will send coordinates soon. When he does, I go in alone. Vincent stepped forward immediately. Absolutely not. It's a trap, Dominic. He wants you isolated and vulnerable. The moment you walk in without backup, you're dead. And if I don't walk in alone, Lily is dead. Dominic's gray eyes were hard as granite. I won't let that happen. Elena Vance appeared in the doorway, clutching a tablet. Her face was pale but determined. Mr. Santoro, I found something. She approached the table, setting down the device. Those irregular transfers I mentioned earlier, I traced them to a shell company that owns property on the East Side docks. Specifically, an old shipyard that was purchased 18 months ago through a series of offshore accounts. Dominic studied the map on the screen. The shipyard was isolated, surrounded by water on 3 sides, with only one road leading in and out. A perfect killing ground. That's where he's keeping her, Dominic said quietly. It's also where he wants to kill you, Vincent countered. Boss, please, let us go in first. Create a diversion. Give you a chance. Dominic shook his head. Marcus has been planning this for 12 years. He'll have eyes everywhere. If he sees even one of our vehicles approaching, he'll kill Lily before we get within 100 yards. He paused, considering, but that doesn't mean we can't be smart about this. He pointed to the map. There's a service tunnel here, running under the old rail lines. It comes out about 200 meters from the main building. Vincent, you take a team through there. Stay hidden until you hear gunfire or I give the signal. What signal? You'll know it when you see it. Danny cleared his throat nervously. Boss, what if this doesn't work? Dominic looked at the young bodyguard, the man who had failed to protect Lily, and was now desperate to make amends. There was no anger in his gaze, only the weary acceptance of a man who understood that death was always one mistake away. Then you follow Vincent's orders and you finish what I started. He turned to leave, then stopped. Pulling Vincent aside, he lowered his voice so only his oldest friend could hear. If I don't come back, get Lily somewhere safe. A new city, a new name, a chance at a real life. His jaw tightened. And find Sophia. Tell her I'm sorry. For everything. Tell her. Tell her Mom would have been proud of the woman she became. The basement was dark and cold. The smell of mold and stagnant water filled the air. Somewhere in the blackness, water dripped in a steady rhythm, the only sound besides Lily's own shallow breathing. Her wrists were bound behind her back with rough rope that bit into her skin. The tape had been ripped from her mouth hours ago, leaving her lips raw and chapped. Her left eye throbbed where the man had struck her, swollen nearly shut. But Lily did not cry. She had stopped crying a long time ago. Tears were useless. They did not make the pain go away. They did not bring her mother back. They did not stop the foster families from hurting her. The darkness did not frighten her either. She had spent too many nights locked in small, black spaces to fear the absence of light anymore. Her first foster family, the Hendersons, had a special punishment for children who misbehaved. A closet beneath the stairs, barely big enough for a dog, with no light and no ventilation. They would lock her inside for hours, sometimes overnight, for offenses as small as spilling a glass of milk. Lily had learned to survive those hours by retreating into her own mind, by counting her breaths, by imagining herself somewhere else, a sunny field, a warm beach, her mother's arms before the drugs took over. She used that skill now. The basement door creaked open. Footsteps descended, the concrete stairs slow, deliberate, confident. A flashlight beam swept across the room, finally landing on Lily's small form huddled in the corner. Marcus Webb stepped into the light. He was smiling, that same sickly sweet smile he had worn under the bridge when he offered her poisoned food. "Hello again, little one." His voice was soft, almost gentle. The voice of a concerned adult, a caring protector. "I hope my men haven't been too rough with you. Children should be treated with kindness." Lily said nothing. She stared at him with her one good eye, her face expressionless. Marcus crouched down to her level, the leather of his jacket creaking. "You're a brave girl, Lily. Braver than most adults I know. But bravery only gets you so far in this world." Still, she remained silent. "The man you tried to save tonight, Dominic Santoro, do you know what he really is?" Marcus tilted his head, studying her face for a reaction. "He's a murderer, a monster. His father killed my father and stole everything that was rightfully mine." And Dominic continued that legacy of blood and theft. Lily's expression did not change. She had heard adults lie before. She knew the difference between truth and manipulation. Marcus's smile flickered. "Just for a moment. You don't believe me. That's all right. You'll understand soon enough." He stood and walked back toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom step. "Rest while you can, little one. The real show begins when your protector arrives." The door closed. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed the room once more, but Lily was not resting. Her one good eye moved slowly across the basement, cataloging every detail. The position of the door, the single guard who checked on her every 30 minutes, the way he always looked at his phone instead of watching her closely. And there, high on the wall near the ceiling, a ventilation grate, rusted at the edges, small, too small for any adult to fit through. But Lily was not an adult. She was a 6-year-old girl who had survived by being small, quiet, and invisible. Her fingers began working silently at the ropes binding her wrists. The abandoned shipyard loomed against the night sky like the skeleton of some massive beast. Behind it, the Chicago River flowed in silence, black as oil, carrying the city's secrets toward the distant lake. Dominic walked through the rusted gates alone, his footsteps echoing on the cracked concrete. No weapon visible, no backup in sight. Just a man walking toward his own potential execution. But hidden deep in his ear canal, a tiny device transmitted everything he heard to Vincent's team, positioned 200 meters away in the service tunnel. The main building rose before him, a cavernous structure of corroded steel and shattered glass. Once, ships had been built here. Now it housed only ghosts and shadows. And one very real monster. "You came." The voice emerged from the darkness, familiar yet changed by time. "I wasn't sure you would." Marcus Webb stepped into the pale moonlight filtering through the broken roof. 12 years had aged him. His brown hair was now more gray than not, deep lines carved into his face. But his eyes remained exactly as Dominic remembered them. Cold, calculating, filled with a hatred that had only grown stronger with time. "I came for the girl," Dominic said, his voice steady. "Nothing else." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Always so direct, just like your father." He began to circle slowly, maintaining distance. "Do you know why I hated him, Dominic? It wasn't the power or the money. It was the betrayal. My father trusted you. Your father used me." Marcus's composure cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "I built half his empire. I bled for him, killed for him, sacrificed everything. And when the Calabrese family threatened war, do you know what he did?" Dominic remained silent. "He offered me as a peace treaty, told them I was responsible for the assassination of their boss's brother, a job he ordered me to do." Marcus's voice shook with decades of suppressed fury. "They were going to torture me to death. The only reason I survived was because I faked my own death before they could finish the job." The words landed like physical blows. Dominic had always known his father was ruthless, but this level of betrayal was beyond anything he had imagined. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Of course you didn't. The great Antonio Santoro protected his legacy above all else, including the truth." Marcus stopped circling, facing Dominic directly. "You think you're different from him, don't you? You think because you protect children and spare the innocent, you're somehow better." His lips twisted into a cruel smile. "But you're the same monster, Dominic. Built from the same blood. You just haven't realized it yet." "What do you want?" Dominic asked. "Money? Territory? Just tell me what it takes to end this." Everything. Marcus spread his arms wide. Every business, every property, every dollar your family has accumulated through murder and exploitation. Sign it all over to me, and the girl lives. He snapped his fingers. 2 armed men emerged from a side door, dragging Lily between them. Her hands were still bound, her face still bruised, but she walked without stumbling. One guard pressed a hunting knife against her small throat, the blade glinting in the moonlight, but Lily did not look at the knife. She looked at Dominic. Her one good eye met his with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child. There was no fear in that gaze, no pleading, only waiting, as if she knew something that no one else in the room had yet discovered. Dominic looked into Lily's eye, and what he saw made his breath catch. It was not fear, not desperation, not the helpless pleading of a captive child waiting to be saved. It was calculation, sharp, focused, deliberate. In that single moment, Dominic understood. Lily had not spent her hours in captivity crying or praying. She had spent them watching, learning, planning. The same survival instincts that had kept her alive on the streets for 5 months were working now, processing information, identifying weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And she had found one. During her imprisonment, Lily had heard the guards talking, complaining about the old electrical system, mentioning how the main breaker was located near the west wall, a single lever that controlled power to the entire building. One of them had joked that a child could pull it if they reached high enough. Lily had remembered. Lily had planned. Now she waited. The guard holding her had grown careless. His attention was fixed on Dominic and Marcus, not on the small girl whose throat his knife threatened. His grip on her arm had loosened slightly as the conversation stretched on. A mistake. Lily moved without warning. Her small head whipped to the side, and she sank her teeth into the guard's hand with all the strength her jaw possessed, biting down on the soft flesh between thumb and forefinger like a feral animal. The man screamed, his grip releasing instinctively. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. "Grab her," Marcus shouted. "Don't let her." But Lily was already running. Not toward Dominic, as everyone expected. Not toward the exit, where armed men blocked every path. She ran toward the west wall, where a gray electrical panel hung at shoulder height for an adult, but within reach for a desperate child who could jump. The second guard lunged for her, his fingers brushing her sweater. She dodged, ducking under his grasp with the agility of someone who had spent years evading adult hands. "Stop her!" Marcus's voice cracked with fury. "Shoot her if you have to." A guard raised his weapon, taking aim at the small figure sprinting through the shadows. Dominic moved without thinking. "Lily, down!" But he needn't have worried. Lily reached the panel. Her small fingers found the main breaker, a heavy red lever marked with warning symbols she could not read but instinctively understood. She pulled with all her strength. The lever dropped. Darkness exploded through the building like a living thing. Every light, every emergency lamp, every glowing exit sign died simultaneously. The shipyard plunged into absolute blackness, deeper than any night. For a single heartbeat, silence. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the darkness, 3 shots, 4, 5 muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. Men shouted, their voices overlapping in confusion. Bodies crashed against machinery, stumbling blind. In his earpiece, Dominic heard Vincent's voice cut through the static. "We're moving in." "Hold on, boss." But Dominic was not waiting. He dropped to the ground, rolling toward where he had last seen Lily. In the darkness, she was invisible. In the darkness, everyone was blind. Everyone except a 6-year-old girl who had learned to navigate blackness years ago, locked in closets and basements by people who should have protected her. Darkness was a weapon for those who knew how to wield it. The service tunnel doors exploded inward as Vincent's team surged into the building, their night vision goggles cutting through the blackness like predator eyes. They had been waiting for a signal, and Lily had provided one more dramatic than anyone could have planned. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Muzzle flashes painted the darkness in strobing orange and white, each burst revealing frozen snapshots of violence, men running, men falling, men dying. Marcus's guards were well trained, but they were blind and unprepared. Vincent's team moved with lethal precision, using the chaos to their advantage. Dominic crawled through the darkness, staying low beneath the hail of bullets that crisscrossed above him. His only thought was Lily. He had to find her before a stray round did. "Lily," he called out, his voice nearly drowned by gunfire. "Lily, where are you?" A small sound reached his ears, a whimper, quickly stifled, coming from beneath a massive piece of rusted machinery to his left. Dominic changed direction, moving toward the sound. His hands found cold metal, then empty space beneath it. He reached in. Small fingers grabbed his wrist. "It's me, Dominic whispered. You're safe now. He pulled Lily out from her hiding spot, wrapping his body around hers as a shield. She was trembling violently, the adrenaline that had fueled her escape now giving way to shock. But she was alive, unharmed. A bullet whizzed past Dominic's head, close enough to feel the heat. He pressed Lily closer to the ground, covering her completely. Across the building, Vincent was a force of nature. Even when a round caught him in the left shoulder, spinning him backward, he did not stop. He switched his weapon to his right hand and kept firing, taking down 2 of Marcus's men before they could react. Boss! Danny's voice cut through the chaos. Behind you! Dominic turned just in time to see one of Marcus's guards taking aim at his exposed back. There was no time to move, no time to raise a weapon he did not have. Danny threw himself into the line of fire. The bullet meant for Dominic tore through Danny's side instead. The young bodyguard crumpled to the ground, his face twisted in pain but his eyes still searching for threats. Danny! Dominic reached for him, but the young man waved him off. Get the girl out, Danny gasped. I'll be fine. Go. The gunfire began to fade as Marcus's remaining men fell or fled. Emergency lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized, bathing the shipyard in dim red light. The battle was over. Bodies lay scattered across the concrete floor. Vincent's team was securing the perimeter, checking the fallen for signs of life. But Marcus was gone. Dominic scanned the building frantically, searching for the man who had orchestrated this nightmare. Nothing. The ghost had vanished again. Boss. Vincent approached, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side, blood soaking through his jacket. You need to see this. He led Dominic toward the far corner of the building, where a figure was slumped against the wall. Elena Vance, bound with rope, her mouth gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Above her, painted on the concrete wall in red letters that dripped like fresh wounds, was a message. Sophia, tonight. Dominic walked toward Elena, his face carved from ice. Each step was deliberate, heavy with the weight of betrayal piled upon betrayal. He crouched down and ripped the gag from her mouth. Elena gasped for air, her carefully maintained composure shattered. Mascara streaked down her cheeks like black tears. Please, she whispered. Please, Dominic, I can explain. 5 years. His voice was quiet, which made it more terrifying than any shout. You've been in my organization for 5 years. You handled money that could have bought governments. You sat in meetings where we discussed our most sensitive operations. He paused. And you were his the entire time. Elena's head dropped, whatever fight remained in her draining away. I'm his cousin, she admitted, her voice hollow. Marcus raised me after my parents died. I owed him everything. When he asked me to apply for a position in your company, I couldn't refuse. So you spied on me, fed him information, helped him plan my destruction. I didn't know he was going to hurt anyone. Elena's eyes pleaded for understanding she did not deserve. He said it was just about money, about taking back what your father stole. I didn't know about the killings, the torture, the child? Dominic's voice cracked like a whip. Did you know he was going to kidnap and beat a 6-year-old girl? Elena flinched as if struck. Her silence was answer enough. Tell me everything, Dominic commanded. Every detail of his plan. Now. The words poured out of her in a desperate flood. The weapons shipment, the one arriving tonight, Marcus has a team positioned to intercept it. They're going to swap the cargo with marked weapons that are already flagged in FBI databases. Elena's voice trembled. When the shipment reaches your warehouse, an anonymous tip will bring federal agents. They'll find the weapons, trace them back to you, and you'll be arrested for arms trafficking. And if I resist, the FBI team will include several of Marcus's men. They have orders to shoot you during the raid. Make it look like you died resisting arrest. She swallowed. Either way, you're finished. And Marcus takes over your territory while you're in prison or in the ground. Dominic processed this information, his mind racing. The shipment was scheduled to arrive in less than 4 hours. Even if he contacted his people at the port, there might not be enough time to prevent the switch. Where is the real cargo being hidden? He demanded. Where is Marcus taking the original weapons? Elena shook her head helplessly. I don't know. He never told me specific locations. He only trusted me with financial information, nothing operational. A small hand tugged at Dominic's jacket. Lily stood beside him, her bruised face pale but her eyes sharp with intelligence that belied her age. I know, she said quietly. Dominic turned to her. What do you mean? When I was in the basement, the guards were talking. They thought I was asleep. Lily closed her eye, concentrating. They said they were moving the real stuff to a container buried under the old pier. Pier 19. They complained about having to dig it up later. 3 in the morning. The rain had not stopped. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the empty streets toward the waterfront, their headlights cutting tunnels through the downpour. Dominic sat in the lead vehicle, Lily curled up beside him. The child had refused to leave his side, and after everything she had done tonight, he could not bring himself to force her. She had saved his life twice now, first at the restaurant, then at the shipyard. She had earned the right to stay close. Pier 19 was exactly where Lily had described an abandoned section of the old docks, long forgotten by everyone except the rats and the ghosts of workers past. The concrete was cracked and overgrown with weeds. Rusted cranes loomed overhead like skeletal giants. There. Vincent pointed with his good arm, the other bound tightly in a makeshift sling. Fresh tire tracks. Someone's been here recently. The team spread out, following the tracks to a section of ground that had clearly been disturbed. Shovels were produced. Within 20 minutes, they had uncovered the top of a buried shipping container. Inside, they found exactly what Elena had described. Crates of marked weapons, each one tagged with serial numbers that would lead directly to Dominic's organization. Planted evidence. A perfect frame job. Destroy it all, Dominic ordered. Every weapon, every crate, every scrap of paper. I want nothing left but ash. His men worked quickly, dousing the container with accelerant and setting it ablaze. The flames roared into the night sky, orange and red against the black clouds, consuming Marcus's carefully constructed trap. Meanwhile, Dominic made a phone call. He had contacts in the FBI men who owed him favors, who understood that sometimes justice required looking the other way. Within minutes, the anonymous tip Marcus had planned was traced and neutralized. The raid would never happen. One crisis averted. But the night was not over. Dominic returned to the SUV to find Lily finally succumbing to exhaustion. Her small body was slumped against the seat, her breathing shallow and even. The adrenaline that had kept her going through kidnapping, beating, and escape had finally run out. He removed his jacket, the expensive Italian wool now stained with blood and rain, and draped it gently over her thin frame. She stirred slightly but did not wake. For a long moment, Dominic simply watched her sleep. This child, this impossibly brave little girl, had trusted him with her life, had fought alongside him against enemies that would have terrified grown men, had given him information that saved his entire empire, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, she looked peaceful, safe. His phone buzzed. A text message from Sophia's number glowed on the screen. Brother, come to my house, alone, or I die. Dominic's blood turned to ice. Sophia never called him brother. She had stopped using that word 5 years ago, the night she cut him out of her life. She called him Dominic when she was being formal, and nothing at all when she was angry. This message was not from Sophia. Marcus had found her. The small house in the suburbs looked peaceful from the outside. Warm yellow light filtered through the curtains. A well-tended garden bordered the walkway. Wind chimes tinkled softly on the porch. It was the kind of home their mother had always dreamed of. Simple, safe, far from the violence that had defined their family for generations. But tonight, that peace was a lie. Dominic approached the front door alone, as Marcus had demanded. He had left Lily sleeping in the SUV with strict orders for Vincent to keep her safe. This was his fight now, his responsibility. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. Sophia sat in the center of the living room, bound to a wooden chair with thick rope. Her wrists were raw where she had struggled against her restraints. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. But she was alive, unharmed. Dominic. Her voice cracked when she saw him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He just appeared and I couldn't. Shh. Marcus emerged from the shadows behind her, pressing the barrel of a pistol against her temple. Let the adults talk, sweetheart. Dominic's hands clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to remain still. Any sudden movement could mean Sophia's death. It's over, Marcus. Your plan failed. The weapons are destroyed. The FBI raid is cancelled. You have nothing left. I have her. Marcus stroked Sophia's hair with his free hand, a gesture that made Dominic's stomach turn. I've always had her, even when she didn't know it. Sophia flinched away from his touch, disgust written across her face. 20 years ago, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. I asked your father for permission to court Sophia. She was young then, but I was patient. I was willing to wait. His expression darkened. Your father laughed at me, called me a fool for thinking I was worthy of a Santoro woman. Then he betrayed me to our enemies and left me to die. So this is about rejection? Dominic asked. About wounded pride? This is about justice. Marcus's composure cracked, revealing the madness beneath. 12 years I spent in the shadows. 12 years of planning, waiting, building my strength. And now, Finally, I'm going to take everything that should have been mine. Dominic took a slow breath. My father was wrong. What he did to you was unforgivable. But what you've done, killing innocent people, torturing Johnny, kidnapping and beating a 6-year-old child, you're no better than he was. You've become the very monster you claim to hate. Marcus's eye twitched. The gun trembled slightly against Sophia's head. Monsters are made, Dominic. Your family made me. His finger tightened on the trigger. And now your family pays the price. Time seemed to slow. Then glass shattered. A ceramic vase flew through the broken window, spinning end over end before connecting with the side of Marcus's skull with a sickening crack. Marcus staggered sideways, the gun swinging away from Sophia's head. Blood streamed from a gash above his ear. In the window frame, breathing hard, stood Lily. Her small face was pale but determined. Her hands were still raised from the throw. She had followed him again. Marcus stumbled backward, blood streaming down his face from the gash on his temple. The gun wavered in his grip, his focus shattered by pain and shock. Dominic did not hesitate. He launched himself across the room, closing the distance in 2 powerful strides, his hand clamped around Marcus's wrist, twisting violently. The gun discharged, once the bullet burying itself harmlessly in the ceiling before clattering to the hardwood floor. But Marcus was not finished. 20 years of hatred gave him strength beyond his injured state. He swung his free fist into Dominic's jaw, snapping his head to the side. The 2 men crashed through the living room, destroying furniture, shattering picture frames, leaving trails of blood on the walls. They fought with fists and elbows and knees, each blow carrying the weight of decades of pain and betrayal. Marcus slammed Dominic against the bookshelf. Dominic responded with a headbutt that split Marcus's lip. They grappled, fell, rolled across the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury. Finally, Dominic found his opening. He drove his knee into Marcus's stomach, knocking the air from his lungs, then followed with a devastating right hook that sent the older man sprawling. Marcus lay on his back, gasping, unable to rise. His face was a mask of blood. His eyes stared at the ceiling, empty of everything except defeat. Dominic picked up the fallen gun. He stood over the man who had murdered his people, tortured his allies, kidnapped a child, and threatened his sister. The man who had spent 12 years planning his destruction. 1 bullet. That was all it would take. 1 bullet and this nightmare would be over forever. His finger found the trigger. Dominic. The voice was small, quiet, but it cut through his rage like a blade through silk. He turned. Lily stood in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the broken window. Her eyes, that one good eye, watched him with an intensity that pierced his soul. She did not speak again. She did not need to. Her presence alone was enough. Dominic looked at the gun in his hand, then at Marcus, bleeding on the floor, then at Lily, this child who had shown more courage and compassion in one night than most people showed in a lifetime. He thought of his mother's last words. Don't become a monster. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered the weapon. I'm not my father, Dominic said quietly, and I won't let you turn me into him. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Vincent had made the call. Minutes later, police officers flooded the house. Marcus Webb was dragged away in handcuffs, his 12-year plan ending not with triumph but with total defeat. The evidence against him, murders, kidnapping, attempted assassination, would ensure he never saw freedom again. Dominic cut the ropes binding Sophia's wrists. She fell into his arms, sobbing against his chest. For a long moment, neither spoke. When Sophia finally pulled back, her eyes found Lily standing quietly in the corner, the child who had saved them all. Who is she? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Dominic walked to Lily and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The girl looked up at him, and for the first time since they had met, something like hope flickered in her ancient eyes. He turned back to his sister. She's family. 3 months later, spring arrived in Chicago, late but warm, melting away the last traces of a winter that had changed everything. The Santoro mansion looked different now, brighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed some of the healing that had taken place within them. Fresh flowers bloomed in the garden. Curtains that had been drawn for years were finally open to the sunlight. And in a bedroom on the 2nd floor, painted a soft lavender at her own request, Lily Chen was getting ready for school. The adoption had not been simple. A mafia boss adopting a homeless child raised eyebrows in every courtroom and government office. But Dominic had resources, connections, and most importantly, determination. After months of paperwork, background checks, and home visits, Lily was officially his daughter. She stood before the mirror now, adjusting the collar of her new school uniform. Her black hair was neatly brushed, held back by a purple headband. Her cheeks had filled out with proper nutrition. The bruises from that terrible night had long since faded. Only the burn scar on her arm remained a permanent reminder of the cruelty she had endured. But Lily no longer hid it beneath long sleeves. It was part of her story, part of what had made her strong enough to survive. School had been challenging at first. Lily had never attended a single day of formal education before. She could not read, could barely write her own name. But her teachers quickly discovered what Dominic had known from the beginning: this child was extraordinarily intelligent. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, catching up to her classmates with remarkable speed. Downstairs, Dominic waited at the breakfast table, reading a newspaper. His empire was changing too. The weapons deals had stopped. The protection rackets were being phased out. Legitimate businesses were replacing illegal operations, one by one. It would take years to complete the transformation. But he had made a promise to his mother, to Sophia, to Lily, and he intended to keep it. Vincent Torres sat across from him, his left arm still in a sling but healing well. The loyal underboss had stood by Dominic through everything, and would continue to stand by him through whatever came next. The front door opened, and Sophia walked in carrying a casserole dish. "Sunday dinner," she announced, setting it on the counter. "Mom's recipe. I thought Lily might like it." Dominic smiled. Sophia had started visiting regularly after that night, slowly rebuilding the relationship they had lost. They were not fully healed. 5 years of silence could not be erased in 3 months, but they were trying, and that was enough. That evening, after dinner and homework and a bath, Dominic tucked Lily into bed. Her room was filled with books and stuffed animals, things she had never owned before, things every child deserved but not every child received. "One more chapter?" Lily asked, holding up her favorite storybook. Dominic settled into the chair beside her bed and began to read. His voice was soft, patient, nothing like his father's voice had ever been. This was something Antonio Santoro had never done for his children. But Dominic was not his father. He had chosen a different path. As Lily's eyes grew heavy with sleep, Dominic closed the book and kissed her forehead. "Good night, little one," he whispered. "Good night, Dad," she murmured back. Sometimes the people who save us are not the powerful ones. They are the smallest souls with the bravest hearts. And sometimes redemption does not come from defeating our enemies. It comes from giving love to those who have never received it. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in a completely unexpected way? Do you believe that everyone deserves a second chance? Share your story in the comments below. We would love to hear from the depths of your heart. If this story touched you, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with those you love. We bring you inspiring stories every day, and your support helps us continue this journey. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. Thank you for watching until the end. Goodbye for now. See you in the next story.